Ellis Cinema back, another dish. How we doing out there? Good, great, grand, and wonderful. As you see on your screen or dial or however you are listening to us here today, Django. And no, not Unchained, you fucking rubes. Wanted to do a Django episode because Arrow's video is just... You know, they're the tops. They're the tops over there at Arrow Video for releasing collector's edition physical media and pulling out all the stops for the Django box set. If you don't know what Django is, minus the fact that it has inspired 30 sequels without it being an actual sequel, besides the fact that it was such a beloved film by Quentin Tarantino that he did his own rendition of it, of Django Unchained later, and you actually hear original music in Unchained that was from Django. So what is Django about? Django is a spaghetti western. Google it if some of you youngins don't know what I'm talking about. We're not going to go too heavy into what a spaghetti western is today, but Django is a spaghetti western about a Union soldier turned drifter. Union soldier turned drifter and his companion, and I don't know if I really care for the Google synopsis that says his companion, a mixed-race prostitute. I don't know. I mean, I think we only touch on that once in the film, so I don't know why that matters, but that's okay. And they are embroiled in a bitter, destructive feud between a gang of Confederate red shirts and a band of Mexican revolutionaries. Also, kind of phoning that synopsis in there. Anyway, before I bring my guest on, I wanted to get these bonus features. I want you to, holy cow, hours of bonus features and a nice little poster and some lobby cards that I thought were great. I was going to take a bunch of pictures and throw them up, but you know what? Just Google Django Arrow release and all of those pictures are there. In fact, they'll be much better quality than what I can do them. So, it's a 2-disc set. You actually get 2 movies with this 4K Django box set from Arrow Video release. You actually get Django and Texas Adios. Maybe I will do Texas Adios down the line, but we're going to kind of stay away from that one today and just focus heavy on Django. And just so you know, unlike most shows, there's going to be some spoilers in this one. In fact, probably the whole goddamn movie. So, but I almost, it feels weird to say spoilers because if you haven't seen a movie where this structure is used, I don't know what to tell you, because this one is about as a tried and true structure that you could possibly get. So what do we got? On disc 1, we do have a commentary by film critic and historian and theorist Stephen Prince. For the most part, I thought Stephen Prince's commentary was pretty good. A couple things that I didn't agree with. In fact, if there was one running theme throughout all these bonus features, people are angry. People are very angry. Not that they were a part of this film, but just either what they experienced through the production or after the fact. So we got that commentary. We have Django Never Dies, which is an interview with the star Franco Nero. Cannibal of the Wild West, an interview with assistant director Rogerio Deodato, and don't worry, horror fans, I'll slap you down a peg or two here in a second with that. Sergio, My Husband, an interview with Sergio Corbucci's wife, Nori Corbucci. That's My Life, Part 1, an archival interview with co-writer Franco Rossetti. A rock and roll script writer, an archival interview with co-writer Piero Vivarelli. He was actually pretty fun to listen to. A Punch in the Face, an archival interview with stuntman and actor Gilberto Galimberti, which that one was hilarious. We'll get into it here in a second, but that's a stuntman and a weapons master that basically said he's the most important person on set. At least... I'm pretty sure he did. Like, I'll pick my guest's brain on that in a second, just to see if I may be over assuming. Discovering Django, an appreciation by spaghetti westerns by scholar Austin Fisher. That was really informative. An introduction to Django by Alex Cox, also super informative, which was an archival featurette with the acclaimed director. We got a gallery of original promotional images, which is those lobby cards that I was telling you about. On Disc 2 with Texas Adios also comes with the commentary, and the reason why I go into Disc 2, even though I said it was Texas Adios, there's a Part 2 of the featurettes that's called That's My Life Part 2, again with Franco Rossetti. So, as I mentioned, this is a piece written, produced, and directed by Sergio Corbucci, who had just a heavy amount of spaghetti westerns. He's actually like number 2 to Sergio Leone. At least that's what they say. We got incredible music by Luis Bacalov, incredible cinematography with by Enzo Barboni. Great editing by Nino Baragli, Sergio Montanari. Also, great production and art direction by Carlo Simi. In fact, I really think it deviates from the American Westerns in the sense that there is nothing played for glamour in this movie for the most part. Anyway, before I get too in, before I lose myself and my guess is like, did you bring me on to talk or did you just bring me on to hear you talk? Show regular from I Know Movies and You Don't. I believe he just put up an episode of his own this morning, which was also a Western, The Wild Bunch. I could be wrong on that, but from I Know Movies and You Don't, Kyle Bruehl, thank you for joining the show again.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. I just have to correct you about one thing. The name's not Keel. It's
I can't help myself. In fact, every time we're about ready, I think I was telling you before we rolled, I just have these thoughts sometime, and like sometimes in the old brain, and like for whatever reason this week I was walking around. Okay, don't forget that on Friday you have a show with Kiao. You had to cancel 2 different dates because of your own shit, and that's not fair to Kiao. And then before you know it, I was just like, why do I keep on saying Kiao? Yeah. So
you're one step away from calling my mom a big fat bitch.
For those of you that don't know, because I know there's a half of you probably that listen to this show that it's totally a South Park reference. Cartman definitely calls Kyle Kiao, and they comment on it. But we're not here for South Park today. We are here for Django, and let's rip it apart today, Kyle. Most of the time we just kind of do this shoot from the hip and see where it goes, which is fine. I don't mind if we do that, but I thought because of its cult classic status, we should really just kind of start from the beginning and go through it. And arguably one of my favorite openings to a film ever is a man dragging a coffin through the muddiest of mud, and setting the tone, and not to mention the theme song Django. Sometimes, Kyle, after the showers, the sun will be shining. And unfortunately, it does not seem that way, or that does not happen for our hero in this sense. But your thoughts on the opening? Where had you seen this before? Because I know you did a rewatch of it last night.
Yeah, no, I've seen it before. It's interesting because as you stated, I just released my 48 out of 50th episode today, a Western retrospective, and Django is not on that 50 episode retrospective.
How dare you?
How dare I? Well, it's because, and as you said, the opening alludes. It's funny because Corbucci, the second most known Sergio of the Italian scene. I believe there was 4 big ones. For Sergio, he is the second most notable name behind Sergio Leone. He did not intend for this to be muddy. He wanted it to be snowy, and the production and where they were shooting just happened to be just immensely muddy, and it ended up being apropos for what has been retroactively described as his Mud and Blood trilogy, which is Django, The Great Silence, and The Specialist. And it just makes the most sense. It's like one of those accidents that wasn't intended, but tells you so much about the tone, tells you so much about the dirty and grimy world that you're about to enter in, the one of two-facedness, of betrayal, of utilizing people's loyalties against each other, of greed. It is a wonderful, wonderful opening, and as we go through it, you're going to get a little bit of negative commentary from me on Django, only because of I just have minor criticisms with Django. It's just an unfortunate thing that it is exactly and directly and intently a version of A Fistful of Dollars. I mean, the producer Manolo Bolognini wanted to make a version of Yojimbo, and Sergio Corbucci was ecstatic to have the opportunity. And so it just lingers in the mind. You're like, oh, 2 years earlier, you have A Fistful of Dollars, which got sued into oblivion because of its direct adaptation of Yojimbo. And it's like the third best of these versions. It's like I don't get me wrong, I love Django, I love things about it, but it's interesting. It's just interesting.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And for those of you that don't know or you haven't seen what Kyle's talking about, obviously Clint Eastwood, A Fistful of Dollars, which is Sergio Leone, and then Kurosawa's Yojimbo. And I mean, all three of them virtually start the same way. So it's like A Fistful of Dollars by way of Yojimbo, and then Django by way of A Fistful of Dollars. But I think, given what it is, I always bring Kyle on to do a number of things, really. But I also like to have him talk me out of possibly manufactured likes that I may have about the film. So I have him on to take me down a peg. So I'm like, you know what? You're fucking right. That's not as desired as it could have been. But let's kind of continue our coffin drag throughout. I think one of my favorite aspects about this film, Kyle, is how lean it is, how sharp it is. Now, it's not the most well acted, but to be fair, I don't think this. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying. No, I was agreeing with you. No, it is not the most well acted.
But it does. I do think we stay sharp, especially around these times. I think it was, well, more often than not, the films of the 60s. This one came out in 66. We didn't waste a lot of time with the film. You couldn't, you'd just be pissing money away. But I also think that this was around the time where you could let the camera roll for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to, and just stay in a master shot. And let the blocking and your actors do the work for you. And we don't have a lot of that here. And case in point, we go from a man dragging a coffin, and now he stands atop of a cliff and is upon a woman and three or four. Well, I think they're part of the rebel clan. They're not a part of the. This thing that was weird is that in the bonus features and actually in the feature, the collectible booklet that's in here, they keep, and I don't know if sometimes they just think that there's people or they're not going to read what you wrote, but they refer to Major Jackson's gang explicitly several times as the Ku Klux Klan, and I was just like. No, the symbolism is there, and it's not even a subtext. It is really nail on the head. But we don't explicitly call them the Ku Klux Klan or the Ku Klux Klan, and I'm just kind of like, why do we why do we keep saying this? Even in the commentary, like he just starts to refer to them as the Klan, and I'm like, hey, guy, but they're not. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, they're Confederates. They're ex-Confederates, which is explicitly stated. I mean, the fact that Franco Nero's Django is an ex-Union soldier drifter,
Right.
It tells you all you need to know visually without necessarily being overt. And this does take place at a time of the West, and obviously they're closer to they're in the South, obviously close to the border of Mexico. I imagine it is more of Texas, maybe it's Arizona, like really South Arizona. Like they are so close to the border that it becomes a way of escape at a lot of points in the film, where certain people can't cross the border. There's this safety utilizing that aspect. But you're right. There's no direct. I mean, they're wearing red hoods at one point, which is, I mean, visually aspect wise, this is not directly the Ku Klux Klan, but it might be the first what is it? The first chapter of what is developing into the organization of the Ku Klux Klan, the philosophy, the antagonism, the desperation of the South, having lost and humiliated and trying to hold on to that fact. So, yeah, it's not directly the organization, but it clearly is like a first chapter of it.
I hate the fact that I love Tarantino so much, and he has such an influence, because when the men in red masks first come on the screen, all I can think is, no one's saying we don't appreciate the bags. The Django, them talking about the bags where they can't see through them and everything. But anyway, Django stumbles upon a woman getting the shit kicked out of her. She is being whipped. Well, a couple of punches and slap, and then she's tied up and whipped. And the critics went nuts, so much so that I don't. Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think this was I think this was banned in the UK until 91, 92, 93, around there.
Yeah, it was banned until about 93. I mean, the UK, it's funny when you use that, because the UK, I mean, they were notorious for banning, like, almost everything. They couldn't handle anything during this time. I mean, this was just, it becomes just you're like, oh my God, this movie got banned. There must be something to, again, banning something almost gives it more power, right?
For sure.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, hence pirate radio. Do you hate that movie?
No, I don't hate pirate radio. It's just, what is that? Is that a Richard Curtis film?
Yes.
I think?
Yes. I figured you'd eat me alive for liking that movie.
No. It's interesting. Richard Curtis is one of those filmmakers where he does like high concept but palatable films, such as like Yesterday. Like he wrote Yesterday as well. And you're like, man, this guy could be exceptional, but he just touts a line of like relatability that is like endearing in a lot of ways. He'll never be on like a top consideration for me, but I do enjoy his writing. I mean, he did Four Weddings and a Funeral. I mean, he did Notting Hill. Like, this is a good writer. So, pirate radio is fine, and it has some eccentric performances in it that I enjoy.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. So you want to know? So I just thought it was interesting that, I mean, obviously the critics and the ratings went nuts because of this whole sequence. But actually, what I find to be the most disturbing, a couple of things. One disturbing and one just different from American filmmaking. Let's start with the easy one. Definitely a turn from American filmmaking, because as she is being whipped and Django is looking on, he does nothing. He just stares at her, and he just kind of looks at the action going on, and there is no intervening just yet. But you would never see that in an American film at that time. You would never, well, one, you wouldn't see the violence, but you certainly wouldn't have our hero let the violence go on, you know?
Yeah, well, so this is interesting, and as I've done like a whole series on the Western and like its incarnations and development and evolution. We are deep mid '60s. We are in the what is the almost first or maybe even second wave of revisionism, and you're right. There's something of a hesitation or just an observation in our hero, quote unquote. I mean, he comes off as more of an anti-hero, especially in what is revealed inevitably in the film to be essentially greed. I mean, he just wants gold. Like, he wants to use people to get gold, and he's punished for it. And we'll get into that and the kind of redemptive or almost mocking of redemptive quality to the film that Sergio Corbucci has, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as we go through. But you're right. Franco Nero, as he approaches and sees the unfolding of violence on an innocent, just watches it happen. And you're right, there's something pretty clever in the scene. Playing off of that subversion is then gunshots go off, and in your mind, based off of how you engage in the Western at this point, you're like, oh, our hero has stopped this from happening.
Yeah.
Then the camera pans over, and no, it's racist Confederates who have stopped the Mexicans out of pure hatred, and now they are going to inflict violence upon the woman. It's just going to be a continuation. And so it shows you that it's an interesting dynamic. They're playing around with what you expect our hero to do, and he does not necessarily do what you expect.
No, and actually, continuing with that, I actually think that's where the more offensive or grotesque or whatever you want to do, because this prostitute, named Maria, we don't know her name yet, but because this prostitute Maria has been getting business on both sides, the Confederates and the Mexican rebels, that's why the Confederates are there now, is because they are trying to find her, because she escaped, and she's been fucking both sides. So their apparent idea of punishment is like, no, fuck all that whipping stuff. We're going to burn you at a cross. We are going to burn you at a fucking cross.
A martyr for the cause, apparently.
Dude, I was just like, that. If anything should be banned, I guess obviously I come from the camp, nothing should be banned, you know. I just fucking, I won't watch it if it's whatever for me, but I'm sitting there going, well, that's far worse than these relatively mild cuts of her being whipped by the Mexican. And obviously, you know, I'm not an asshole. I know that there's a lot of dated, you know, this violence is dated, and what we're talking about, the banning of this movie, it certainly wouldn't be banned if it came out today. But I just thought that was very interesting, as that's where the American critics were kind of just like, nope, that's too much whipping. We can't have any of that. And
well, it's also because they don't follow through with the burning. Like, maybe they would have been like, oh, and then they do that? No, they definitely don't.
And wouldn't you know it, who intervenes? Our anti-hero Django says, hey, you really shouldn't be doing that to a woman, and is like, Kyle and I were discussing moments prior. Where were you during the whipping, guy? You just, that was okay? Is that kind of like your thing? Like, you were just like, oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I might have an answer to that.
Okay.
Django's a very complicated character. As we go through, you get these shades, and it's not like simply being disconnected force, such as in Yojimbo, where you have the samurai coming in as sort of just an entity of himself and getting to witness two sides in acting. The same unfolds in, say, Fistful of Dollars with Clint Eastwood. Django has connections to the Mexicans. He has a history with them. He has a relationship with the general. And Corbucci, being a extreme leftist, and I'm sure in the commentary, if you got director Alex Cox, who also is an extreme leftist, and generated a lot of his political, flourish from Corbucci in particular when he did Straight to Hell and Walker. He very much is influenced by Corbucci in this manner. You get the sense that he is trying to say in that scene that even though the Mexicans are doing something terrible, but they're not going to kill her. So therefore, they are on a higher ethical consideration in this weird, morally gray world because he has more sympathies for the cause of Mexico. That's why he relishes in the infiltration sequence of in Mexico. He relishes in he gives more of sympathetic depth and to the general and his men in sort of a consideration of execution. So again, I think the personal politics of Corbucci are muddying, excuse the pun, muddying the waters here.
No, pun away, pun away.
I also want to just comment on this intervening of Django. So this is where minor criticism comes in. I think visually Django is impeccable. I think Franco Nero looks the part. I think he, with that Union uniform, that muddy coffin, dragging it, how he approaches the men, he is a man of confidence. But I got to tell you, the English dub of Tony Russell almost eliminates, and it wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but Django talks too fucking much. He talks too much. You got to be a reflection of the silent type. But he constantly is telling people what he's thinking. He's constantly, and sometimes he makes like a little comment to distract you, and then like in this scene, which I like. I like the line. He goes, "Apologies if I've offended," and then he drops his bag and just shoots them. I like the line, but man, there's something of a disconnect in the voice and the fact that he just talks too much. I don't know how you feel, but that's how I was feeling when I was rewatching it.
So I love that you brought that up. I absolutely love that you brought that up. So obviously for me, I am no stranger to the foreign films. I prefer it. And with this, they had the original uncompressed Italian dub. It is, I can tell you, sir, two different movies. When I watched the Italian dub, the one that they chose, and I'm pretty sure it's not Franco Nero. In fact, I mean, those movies, there's no sound being shot on set. Everything is done in post. And it, like I said, it's two different movies, but it is much lower, a much more... confident is not the right word. It's a more terrifying voice to listen to, whereas... You are 100% correct. It is like it, and I would go as far to say, for the most part, shit hasn't changed. We're still ruining foreign films with our dubs. In fact, I come from the camp that we shouldn't cater to the dumb American. You can watch it as is. You can read subtitles, or you can watch a fucking different movie, because the one that I always state all the time is The Raid. So The Raid The Raid 2 is my favorite action film of all time, but this is more specifically for The Raid 1. If you do not play it with the original Indonesian audio, it's two different movies. It's too lighthearted. There is too much talking, and I feel it's like, and I mention this in the podcast frequently. I'm not a dumb viewer. Okay, I know that there's a lot of dumb people out there, but I almost feel like we're enabling them to continue to be dumb, because the Raid English version is vastly different, not in what takes place, but how I receive all the information. In fact, I would lean more towards it being comical than I do with the original Indonesian dub, and that is no different here. And actually, what I had learned listening to what's the guy that loves the spaghetti westerns? Oh, Austin Fisher. On this, what he said the reasoning for that English dub was, Kiao, was because it had come out so close to A Fistful of Dollars, they actually used, I think, one of the same guys for the who did the dub for A Fistful of Dollars. And he actually goes on to say is that what they tried to do is they tried to make it more appealing to the Western audience by using that guy as opposed to, to emulate Clint Eastwood more so than kind of Franco Nero, Django, and The Individual. So that I think that I would agree with everything that you said. It's too, because of the content that we're seeing, it's too soft for me. It's too safe for me. And I mean, dude, when I played it, it took all of about, I don't know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes where I was like, yep, we're not watching the English dub. We're going right for the 2.0, even though I got a nice sound system. We're going to go for the 2.0 Italian dub because, one, I always want to see the movie as it was intended, but two, like, I knew, it's been years since I've seen this movie, and I just knew that it would be a completely different experience, so it is not shocking to me at all, and I agree 100%. Like, I really wish the powers that be, like, I don't know who's making these decisions, but whoever sits back and goes, nope, that's fine, and doesn't realize that you're essentially making your own movie, I don't get it, man. I never have, and I never will.
Yeah.
Because it's just, there are enough of us out there where you don't need to dumb it down, man. You don't. And here's the thing, if you do, I'm not going to learn, or it's going to take me longer to learn. So let's just rip the fucking Band-Aid off. Why is it okay for you to do Parasite and think, "Oh, this is fucking great," and that was sub. They didn't give you a dub, but like, dude, still after Parasite I'll be like, "Oh, watch this movie. I think I recommended Minari. Oh, I got to do subs." And it's like, "Well, wait a minute. Weren't you the one that said you loved Parasite last year? What's happening? You've already regressed?"
I don't know. Yeah, Parasite was almost a zeitgeist anomaly, like where people like didn't think about it, and then now that they think about it, because it's a film that is not as highly recommended or is not in the popular culture, that there's a weird different consideration. I don't know. Every time I talk about silent film or foreign film, it's all a conversation about how you have to like retrain your brain to watch things in a different manner. It's like learning another language.
And it's not. It's not. It's not like you're actually. Well, we don't need to get into it. So anyway, bodies are already piling up. We got Maria and Django making their way into, it is arguably one of the most, so Franco Nero and Loredana Nuziak, who plays Django and Maria, they make their way into the town. It is arguably the most desolate town the most desolate and muddy town that I have seen on film ever. Would you disagree? Would you disagree?
No, I would not disagree. What a miserable town. Like,
dude, it definitely is. It's a character unto its own.
Yeah, they got geisha hookers that are like all around with too much makeup. Like, it's like a clown show within the most miserable, depressed place. I mean, it's truly a wonder to like look at, because it is so desolate, so grimy. I love the use of production. Like, it's great.
And this is where we meet, as Kyle said, some painted up prostitutes, and we also meet Nathaniel, the bartender played by Angel Alvarez, or Angel Alvarezi, if that fucking helps you out. I don't know why I did that, but but you could make the argument Nathaniel is probably the strongest actor that we have in the film. Would you disagree with that?
I don't think I disagree with that. He comes off. I mean, he has the most to. Everybody else is either brooding or has an air of confidence or maliciousness or insidiousness to them because you're either dealing with Nero, the confident, brooding hero, or you're dealing with the villains, either the general or the major, either from the Confederates or and the Mexicans, and they're all it's almost easier to be performative in those ways, to be either quiet or over the top. And Nathaniel has to sit right in the middle. He's worried. He's balancing the extortion of both sides and the ill intent of both sides. He's using the women that he owns as sort of negotiating tactics. So he has to constantly be worried and fretting, and there's something internal going on with Nathaniel a lot. And he's very conflicted, and that's hard to do. So I would say, yes, he has the hardest performance to do, and he does it well.
And also, his arc, I think, is just much more realized than the other characters, for sure. Like, he actually does have the moment where he's like, and it's not, he doesn't have a big moment, but it's a moment enough where he's like, all right, maybe I've been an asshole all my life, and maybe I should help these two out. But this is where we basically plagiarize the movies that we were talking about earlier, A Fistful of Dollars and Yojimbo, where Django and Maria are now in the bar, and the bartender kind of gives the scuttlebutt on what is actually going on in the town, and this is really just... I'm hesitant to say a direct ripoff, and yeah. Feel free to eat me alive, eat my lunch. I'm all for it. I feel I don't want to call it a direct ripoff because I fear that if you do this, then that means if we go ahead and call how Django, becomes familiar with the Mexican renegades or the rebels under Major Jackson, how he learns of this through a bartender that's ripping off a Fistful of Dollars and Yojimbo. Is that to say now, Kyle, that you can never have a bartender that leads you to more information ever again? Because that's what I fear here, is that you can't ever have a bartender that spills the beans because once upon a time they did it earlier.
Well, so two things. I agree with you. I don't think it is a blatant ripoff at all, and I think actually Corbucci and Bolognini, like everybody a part of this creative team, whoever wrote, produced, and directed it, I think they knew that they were doing flashes of Fistful of Dollars, so they were making like similar structure, but made important changes that I think are crucial. The bartender in this movie, and this could be Corbucci making a commentary on such film, because unlike Yojimbo, unlike Fistful of Dollars, Nero's character Django, I don't think the bartender's telling him anything he doesn't already know. He's already heading to that town. He already has a plan. He already knows what's going on. He knows the major. He probably has maybe had encounters with the major. I mean, there's references, vague allusions that he knows of the major and that maybe some of his atrocities. Maybe he knew somebody personally that was impacted by the major. He definitely knows the general for the Mexican army and revolutionaries. So I don't think the bartender here is almost futile. Like, he's just talking exhaustively or nervousness and saying things, and Django does not necessarily engage because he already knows. He already knows what's going on. He has his plan, and he's going to enact his plan, which goes pretty marvelously until the woman finds herself into the situation. Well, I'm sure we'll get to that. But let's be fair here to also Fistful of Dollars. Yojimbo for all of its quote unquote originality, is based off a Dashiell Hammett novel called Red Harvest, which then again is credited to have been an adaptation of a Dashiell Hammett novel of The Glass Key. But the dynamics of pitting one group against the other and having like some connections within the town to enable that or get information and use it to their advantage as a character. That's Red Harvest, and the Coen brothers would go on to use that as kind of an example for Miller's Crossing. Again, there's shades of originality within Yojimbo and how it's interpreted to the fusion setting and the dynamics of Showdown. And Fistful of Dollars, I mean, follows it more to a T. Django understood that the legal problems and dynamics, and they changed up things quite impressively.
Love that fucking answer. I get really nervous sometimes of because in that commentary, Stephen Prince, I don't want to say he loses his mind. He doesn't lose his mind, but boy, does he really kind of stick a knife in that particular scene as he's talking about it, and just is like, we've already saw this in Yojimbo. And I guess in the thing about it is, okay, you don't necessarily want to do something similar in another movie that was done before, but at the same time, I do feel that if your particular story is different and warrants it, not that this one is, I mean, obviously they are all very similar to each other, but I worry going forward that you can't ever have another character like that because it happened before. And you're a writer, I'm a writer, your lovely lady's a writer. I would hate for us to get into a position where we, have to rewrite a bunch of shit because, somebody's going to be like, that's like Yojimbo. That's going to be like A Fistful of Dollars. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, the only ones that reside in this desolate town is Nathaniel and these prostitutes. And that's where, and I love your answer that he already fucking knows. That's why he's dragging the GD coffin through the mud and the muck where my friends died face down in the muck. So this scrumpet, this whore, sorry, just brief John Goodman blackout. But before I forget, you want to know what else is? We said the town is a character of its own. I don't know what else is that I think I wanted to say on my second time watching. So's that fucking coffin. It's its own character. Like the way that they have designed that coffin and gave it the character, whether it be the mud or the burns, the etchings on it, that coffin's a character of its own. And in fact, it should be credited.
I believe it has a name, Sean. It's Django.
Oh, you son of a bitch. That's literally right what we lead into. One of the girls comes over and she's just like, I'm not afraid of, the girls are afraid of this man carrying a coffin, but I'm not. So who's in the coffin? And you are right, sir. Franco Nero takes a look at it, looks back to the prostitute and says, Django's in there. And now we have for those who hadn't seen the film before, now we have a very interesting, I think, play on that. And obviously, you and I know what happens, and we'll get there. But I love that line. I think it's extremely dark for the 60s, like I can just picture these, housewives that were dragged by their husband or whatever, that were born in the 40s, and they see this in the 60s, and they're just like, what? Wait a minute, what's going on here? But I also like the idea that up until that point, it could be anything. He could have said anything, and he elected to go with Django.
So, here's an interesting aspect to it that brings me back a little, just moments before when he has his introduction to the men. He does give his name. He says his name is Django, and so when it's reinforced that it's Django in the coffin, it comes off as humorous, and I think that's what the writers intended. For me, this goes back to my criticism that Django talks too fucking much. I really wanted him to not give his name. What reason did he have to give his name anyway to some Confederate bandits that are essentially, vigilantes around? I feel like when he says that his name is, it should be revealed later on that he's referring to himself, and that there's a mystery to the coffin, and that up to the point is the gun is the gun Django? Is he Django? There should be a question to that, and I personally would have liked to have seen it played out that way, but that's not the movie we have. It's more of a humorous, tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement that perhaps he's carrying his own coffin, and I get that that's the point.
Yeah, and like again, like timing is everything, Like I don't know that. Well, to some extent, I think if we did this movie nowadays, if you can execute it properly, I don't even need to hear him talk ever throughout the entirety of the film. You could go almost, full Drive. Not that Ryan Gosling doesn't talk in Drive, but we don't know
he's monosyllabic.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that. You know what? Maybe I'm making a statement here and now. Let's do Django again. Oh, wait a minute. We've already done Unchained? All right. Never mind then. We don't need...
They talk quite a bit.
Just a smidge. Speaking of talking, did you happen to catch... I think you're just kind of you're a moderate fan of Tarantino, right?
Let's just say I am a real. It's like you get brought up. Like I'm a lapsed Catholic. I'm a lapsed Tarantino fan in a lot of ways. Like it's like I'm also a Tarantino apologist, much like I'm a Catholic apologist. I got brought up in cinema by Quentin Tarantino. Like his influence on our generation is undeniable, important. I just in my lapse nature, what I mean by that is I've gone back to see where he got his ideas, where he put all those things in a blender, and the more I discover from the past, the more I appreciate the past, much like he does. So I appreciate him. I have a sobering, just. It's a sobered love that is tempered. I am not a devout fan. I've met those people, and I'll tell you this: if you meet a devout Tarantino fan in LA at any of the screenings that are at the New Bev or ArcLight, rest in peace, whenever it happens, it will make you not want to be a Tarantino fan meeting those people.
Well, now hold on a second. Now I have frequented the New Bev several times. I guess I just must not have come across the same fans you are, because I'm devout, but as we've discussed on my show and your show, I'm a weird Tarantino fan. Like my favorites are not what the masses are. My two...
Neither are mine.
Yeah, my favorites are Jackie Brown and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and people lose their fucking minds when I tell them that. They're just like, what? Not Pulp Fiction? Not Inglourious? Not Reservoir? No, dude. No. I like Once Upon... And I look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as epic. I really do. Like, and I don't know. The reason why I asked was because you had mentioned Django has a lot of talking. I was just curious if you happened to listen to him on Rogan, because he doesn't make a whole lot of appearances. So it was kind of nice to see him. Oh, my God. Do you hear that fire alarm going off, or like tornado alarm going off right now? Good Jesus, that's loud. Hold on. Let's see if the fans can hear it.
That's an Ohio specialty.
Jesus. But that had just got released, and it was nice to see him talk for 2 hours and 30 minutes or whatever it was, and I just didn't know if you had dabbled in that yet.
Not yet. I know. Obviously, everybody was very quick to post some of his particular reactions. I'm curious to listen, obviously, because he's an interesting dude. He's just an interesting dude. It's interesting how unapologetic he can be and get away with it, though. in this day and age, because you'd think that in our and I'm not using this as a derisive sort of idea of cancel culture. A lot of people like to say it's a responsibility culture, holding people up to a standard or something like that. I do think there's a legitimate weird cancel culture that's going on, and it is fascinating to me that Quentin Tarantino can double down on things and not apologize, and he'll be fine.
Yeah, I love it. It's like a Bill Burr. It's like a Trey Parker and Matt Stone, where they're in this weird gray area. And honestly, I'm very hesitant to call it a gray area. I think it's just, Quentin said it best to an interview a long time ago, where he was just like, I reject your point of view. And I think that's kind of like where those guys are, and I'm here for it. I really am. I don't know. He said something along the lines in that interview, and for the record, I'm in a love-hate relationship with Joe Rogan. Like, I've seen his stand-up stuff. I never paid, because I was just like, I'm not paying.
I've never loved his stand-up. I've seen him at the Comedy Store.
No.
And he's not what I would call my cup of tea.
No.
And he's not an offensive comedian in any way.
He just does dick and fart jokes, and I'm like, dude, I'm not a Neanderthal. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I get what you mean. Like, it's funny how there's some people who are really, really nasty about Joe Rogan, or just and the guy I think presents himself adequately. He is not an expert in any of these fields, but my goodness, is he a curious mind, and he'll allow people to talk and engage them, I think, appropriately. I think sometimes he has not been overtly critical on some things that have gotten brought up. He said some stupid things just in kind of passing and in thought. But again, this is just a comedian doing a show and trying to exercise some thoughtful conversation, if you will, in a general degree. But man, some people hate that guy.
Yeah, they do. And also the flip side of the coin, man, some people's devotion to him is nauseating.
I agree with you there too. Again, this goes into this toxicity of fandom that I think Quentin Tarantino has. I think Joe Rogan has. I think any substantial celebrity, especially ones with particular points of view or particular avenues of thought and of entertainment, they will have a division, and sometimes on opposite ends of those divisions are some extreme people that you don't want anything to do with on either.
Well, I just kind of wanted to sidebar with it, because Django's definitely brought up, this Django, not Django Unchained, but before we kind of move past it, you're right, though. He does say Quentin, for that matter, he says something that I was just like, you didn't need to phrase it like that, because you can say the same shit, just not like that, without getting the hate. But Joe brings up the whole Bruce Lee Once Upon a Time in Hollywood controversy, and he says, instead of just being like what he said months ago, I reject your opinion or whatever, he's like, anybody who has a problem with the whole Bruce Lee cameo or whatever, everyone besides Shannon Lee can suck a dick. And I went, you could have said the same shit, just not like that, because someone's gonna find a problem with that. Like, it's just
also how he talked about Harvey Weinstein. I saw the comment where he's like, oh, I knew that there was some questionable behavior. I didn't know of any rapes. And he goes, and I should have told him, man, you're gonna fuck this all up. And I'm like, that's your Yeah,
that's what he wanted to tell him, Kyle. You're gonna fuck this up. Forget about.
You're gonna fuck our movie relationship. You're gonna fuck our movies up. I'm like, what is wrong with you, man? Find a better way to phrase it.
Yep. So, as the girls are getting ready for whoring, Anyway, no, we meet another character in Django, Brother Jonathan, who's actually an undercover spy, and don't worry, he gets his. Man, like because it'd been years since I've seen this, I went, oh well, that's fucking Reservoir Dogs. But anyway. Yeah, after he stands over top of Django for a moment or two, saying nothing, Django spits a cork in his face, and then we go up. I just thought the reason why I said the ladies are getting ready for whoring, dude, what a shit life for Maria, huh? She just goes from being whipped and beaten to rescued by Django. And now she is up in the room of Nathaniel's bar, and basically, like, I forget what her name is, the other prostitute, Anita or something like that. But she's like, "Well, come on, you got to get dressed now. The rebels will be over soon." And it's just like, so wait a minute, you just went from getting beaten and whipped, and now you got to get all gussied up to go whoring again, and it hasn't even been 25 minutes since your last lash. And I just thought, the West sucks. The West to live in the West sucks.
The West sucked in a lot of ways, and for women in particular. There's a wonderful little Prairie Home Companion kind of movie from Kelly Reichert, who did First Cow last year. Wonderful, wonderful movie. It's called Meek's Cutoff, and the whole movie's done in female perspective, and just the limitation of information that they get, the behest that they have to men, and the ignorance and ego of men in the world. I mean, it tells you everything about the suckage that is the female experience, and that you either were at the behest of your husband, if you were lucky, or you were a whore. And that just is not a dynamic. I mean, obviously, many Westerns have ventured the dynamic. I mean, next week, for those interested, we talk Unforgiven, and just the really terrible life and of women in the West, and that it breeds rage, and that the whole movie is pushed forward by the rage of women. And it's righteous rage. They are righteous in their rage. They have a point. They have a meaning behind it. And so this movie is not the one that ventures that, but man, it does it show the poor situation that women can be in.
And it only gets poorer if you're a minority as we go to the next scene, where we meet Major Jackson's characters having a bit of target practice. A little bit of a target practice with, I forgot to mention, actual people. He is having them, almost like a shot put. He is, let them go. And a Mexican will run away and blam, shoots them dead. Sometimes he'll let them get farther than the other, but boy, this is that Ku Klux Klan coming out without actually saying it, in terms of the hate we now have for our villain Major Jackson, played by Eduardo. Now, is it Fajardo or Fajardo? Fajardo or Fajardo?
I think it's Fajardo. If I were to have an amateur take on it, I am no expert in linguistic pronunciation. I'm actually pretty bad at it.
The same, and all I do is watch foreign films. I don't understand how bad I am at it, but I always like to do two. Eduardo Fajardo, or Ohio speak, Eduardo Fajardo. So, fucking for you Ohioans. But yeah, no, I don't understand how 98% of what I've watched in the last 3 months has been foreign, and I'm not getting any better. I don't. And I'm trying. Like, I'm actually trying to. Like, that interview I did with with Andy Owen, Philip and Van Woo. Fuck, I was trying so hard. And they were like, Sean, just hold on a second, bud. That's not how you do that, you fool.
Well, I mean, at least you prefaced it in a sense that they were allowed to correct you, and then you learn from that. You know, that's the only way, really.
It's true. It really is. And I want to hear it, like, from because, dude, you watch a lot of these foreign films, and you learn very quickly that half, like especially when it comes to films out of the East, the Asian films, half of what they're the dialogue is portraying to us is it's not even in the original script. It's like we have to. I don't even want to say dumb it down, but we almost have to. We have to present it in America's culture and not say Thailand's culture. And I'm like, no, man, we don't have to do. How am I going to learn it? Now, the only thing that doesn't transfer too well, but again, I chalk this up to, the dubs or the subtitles. The only thing that doesn't transfer well is comedy. Like that's the only shit where I'm just like, is that supposed to be funny? Like I like ever since that Jackie Chan movie where they use like a stone dick to defeat the fucking enemy, I was just like, there are just some things here. Like oh no, it wasn't a Jackie Chan movie. It was a Donnie Yen movie. It was the Iceman 2, and they actually use an ancient stone dick to defeat the villain. And I was just like, look, I know that this is meant to be funny, but
do you think that's a weird like Clockwork Orange reference? Like,
you know what? Yes, I do. I quick question. Then it's a stupid question. Who did it better in this scene where Major Jackson is lighting up minorities? Who did it better, Rambo 4 or Apocalypto?
Man, it's so interesting. Rambo, what a strange series, because it starts off so well. You know, Rambo First Blood is such a different entry than what follows. You're like, what happened in this trajectory? It gets, because the first one is like Vietnam vet, I just want to be left alone. And it's all the oppressiveness of home on his state of being, and that there's a discomfort or a disconnect from the appreciation of what men went through in war to do for this country, and there's a divide. He doesn't kill very many people. He wounds a lot of people in the first one, and then it becomes overly patriotic. Like from the continuation from 2 to 3, where he helps the Mujahideen, like, and then 4, which is just baffling to me in a lot of ways. I mean, we won't even get into 5, and you also brought up Apocalypto, which is interesting. Have you seen the old movie Naked Prey?
No, I have not.
So Naked Prey is about British colonialists who get captured by local tribes, and they go through the same, like, run and we're going to throw spears at you kind of thing. That goes on in Apocalypto. Basically, and then the guy gets away and it's a chase. So Apocalypto is basically the Naked Prey, if you really go back. Apocalypto, what an interesting movie that ends in such a Mel Gibson manner that it almost it almost takes away from the entire, like, really well done, executed tension experience that is Apocalypto. The ending mars what is a pretty stylistically and competent film. But you're right. Django has this shades. I mean, there's and what's really unfortunate about Django and its interpretation of this is that it's informed on history, because up to even the 1950s, indigenous Brazilians were being target practice for white slavers until the 1950s, and Corbucci was very aware of this kind of history. So I mean, it has shades of some very actual aspects of history, whether it is American, but it is historical reality that this has happened, and there's dark shades in this sequence for sure.
Well, yeah, and actually, again, Stephen Prince says something along the lines of, the subtext of what's going on in the culture right now. I'm like, dude, you can call it subtext, but this shit is right in your fucking face. Like, I don't I don't need to like. I wonder what this is meant to symbolize right here. No, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. There's no, but yeah, like I agree. Like having totally has his finger on the pulse. And I mean, something that I neglected to mention at the beginning of the show is just like this movie was made to make money. Like it wasn't like this artistic thing, you know, say Yojimbo was, and you know, Leone's work. This was definitely. I almost feel like to an extent not to an extent. I feel like we pulled all the tropes that we needed to you know make a film that's going to make its money back. I think he exceeded, and he didn't even know he was going to exceed expectations at the time. But you know, this is another one of those instances where, you know, we really are hitting every nail on the head in terms of, and not to mention, this is 20 some odd minutes into the film, and we are moving briskly along in terms of who our characters are, and now whether we're rooting for Django or our disdain for Major Jackson. It's definitive now, and we're not even through the first act, which is something that, you know, I almost, in some regards to films these days, I feel like we kind of do this waiting game where it's like, we'll reveal who you should be, you know, in Act 3, and it's just like, well, we don't always need to do that. Or the flip side is that we show you the villain right in the beginning in the opening credits, and we're like, all right, this is who you got to hate. And it's like, well, that doesn't work too. I'm a shitty fan. It's got to be perfect. Otherwise, I don't want none of it. So anyway, he's gunning down minorities left and right, Rambo style. I would just like to point this out because I know it's gonna make you angry. Not angry, but you're going to giggle. I actually think Rambo 4 is my favorite installment. You heard it here first. Bring on the hate DMs. I don't give a fuck. I don't know why I love Rambo 4. Like, Burma is still happening. Like, that the civil unrest is still happening out there. And, you know, Rambo just decides to go through. And obviously that end sequence, that's why I come to see a Rambo movie. And I agree, though. I agree with you, Kyle. That's not where we started in terms of wanting to see a Rambo film. That's not where we didn't start out with, I'm going to see him hop on the back of a truck and just rip through motherfuckers with this machine gun. I know that's not in theory why we're supposed to be there, but god damn it. I just a little side note, I took my mom to see that film. Dude, like, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, how could you know that was going, not that you didn't know that Rambo was going to be violent, but how could you know it was going to be that violent, you know?
I mean, they really did take it to another level in that movie.
Yeah, and she had her head down the whole time. I was so embarrassed at myself. I was just like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, well, you can watch it, Mom. It's just a movie. She's like, I don't need to. And I'm like, fair enough. I feel like an asshole. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, Brother Jonathan informs Major Jackson that there's a newcomer in town, Django. The whores ready themselves, and of course the Major Jackson goes into town with a couple of thugs, and wouldn't you know it, well, they get up in Django's face, and he decides to mow a couple of them down, leaving Major Jackson alive. And which is just inexplicable. As the story continues, then you know that he wants Jackson, and yet he lets him live 3 times. It's just, what are you doing, Django? You had him. You had him dead to rights 3 different times, but then we wouldn't have him in blackface to hit that whole subtext that we were talking about. But anyway, he tells Major Jackson, how many people you got left? He's like, about 48. He's like, all right, why don't you bring them here? Why don't you bring them back here? And it'll be me versus all of yous. And, of course, everyone thinks he's fucking crazy. But this is where we get to one of our reveals, Kyle. And it is the...
Well, I think we get to the blow the load, 30 minutes, the best part of the movie, really.
Yes, and it is the big reveal is how conveniently placed that tree was in the center of town.
Yes.
There's nothing in the town, but you know what? Fucking Django's got some cover that just seemed to appear. And I don't even remember seeing that when Maria and Django are entering the town, but that's here nor there. It could have been there. It could have been there, but I don't remember seeing that giant log there. Anyway, Major Jackson and his thugs all come down, and Django finally opens the coffin after a little pep talk from Nathaniel where he's just like, you just need to get the hell out of here. Otherwise, you're going to get moited. You're going to be left out in the mud here and moited, Django. You got to go. I don't know why I went full 1920s there, but it is what it is. It reveals a machine gun, a Gatling gun, as the French would call a mitrailleuse, and Django kills all 48 people. I think like 42 of the 48 people in a violent, hyper-violent scene, and I gotta be honest, I loved it. It was so over the top and silly, which, you go back and you watch a lot of these movies, half of them are going to be that, and for me, it just kind of checked the boxes where I was like, all right, so this movie is batshit insane. I'm with it. Now, was this an entertaining portion for you, or were you like, good God, man, let's have a little bit more story first?
No. This is why you watch Django. Okay. The sequence is Django. This is perhaps what's a little unfortunate for me is because what unfolds after is a pretty standard at this point trajectory based off of A Fistful of Dollars, maybe kind of based off of Westerns, is that the hero goes through a process of, seemingly winning, then is captured, punished, but then ultimately wins at the end. This is a pretty standard trope and structure for these kinds of Westerns. Which Corbucci would then subvert that expectation in his next one, the Great Silence. The Great Silence, he very much uses that against your expectation, follows a similar trajectory, and creates an immensely bleak outcome based off of it.
You just did an episode not too long ago for The Great Silence, didn't you?
Yeah, no, it's my favorite Corbucci film. I think it's one of the greatest Westerns ever done. You have Jean-Louis Trintignant as the literally silent gunslinger because he's mute. His vocal cords were slashed. And Klaus Kinski as the antagonist, as the bounty hunter, up against him. Talk about... when we're talking about a movie already that has literal tethers to Quentin Tarantino, The Great Silence is basically The Hateful Eight. You watch The Hateful Eight, and all the imagery is taken from The Great Silence. The costuming, the snowy landscapes, the look, the bounty hunters ending up in a place and having showdowns based on. It's not as intimate. It's not as Agatha Christie, mystery at the center of it that Quentin Tarantino went with, but very much influenced. Great Silence is fantastic.
I have to know your brief thoughts on The Hateful Eight. You can either just say like, dislike.
I like it more than Django.
This Django or Django Unchained?
Django Unchained.
So if you had to rank them, it would go this Django, Hateful Eight, and then Unchained?
No. I would say Hateful Eight, then this Django, then Django Unchained.
Oh, well, now I'm going to get hate DMs on your behalf. Now
yes,
we're ruffling feathers.
I'm going to say it right now. Django Unchained is second to last on my list of Quentin Tarantino movies. I think Death Proof is last, but only because it's just such a half thought in the total grindhouse picture, so it's not like a real film.
No,
But
it should count as a half. I've always said that. Like, it should always count as a half of one of his films. It's still a good movie for what it is, but in his catalog, it's the only one that you're just like, well, yeah, this is it. It's just, but I've changed my perspective. It just makes me happy because I love him and Robert Rodriguez. So it was nice that we got a Grindhouse package from them. But yeah, I agree with you. It's like it's a half of a Tarantino film.
Yeah, so I mean, if we go into the full scale, Django Unchained is last. Unfortunately, like there are elements of Django Unchained that I quite like. I think it's a humorous, enjoyable watch. I think Leonardo DiCaprio got robbed of an Academy Award nomination. Like, I mean, he is excellent in that movie, but I find it to be half baked in a lot of ways, and that's for another time, I think.
Yeah. So let's just keep it moving here. This is one of my only scenes that I didn't care for, Kyle. So this would be one of my negatives that I would go along with you, is how uncomfortably weird the love affair instantly becomes between Django and Maria. Like, it is so, like, he straight up tells her, yeah, no, I mean, I don't even think he says you're welcome when she's like, I thank you for saving me. And this is where I wish that I did editing and could put in bits, because most assuredly I would have feels like a real woman. I would totally put that right here, because that is essentially the line that she says to keep him from leaving, and it is inferred that they now fuck. And I just thought it was so uncomfortable how she's just like, I've never been saved before, and for the first time in my life I feel like a real woman. And he stops at the door, and he turns, and he comes towards her, takes off the top part of her clothes and says, well, I'm glad that I made you feel like a real woman. And then it's end scene, and we obviously, the audience is led to believe, okay, they just were intimate. But I was just like, well, wait a goddamn minute. Like, that was awful. Like, I definitely want to care more than that.
No, the implications of that scene are actually really weird.
Yes.
So I'll explain this real briefly in two ways, because I don't think I agree with you. I think it's the worst scene in the movie. I think it's the laziest written scene in the movie, and that they don't necessarily consider what they're saying. And this is 100% why I think they wrote the scene. They wanted to subvert the idea of the silent, basically golden heart hero that is a part of the Western, that they have no, you see a lot of movies, your expectation of the hero is that, no, I do not require payment for my good deed. I do not require your body. Like, it was all for good intentions and in a lot of ways. And so I think the idea here is to subvert expectation, which was a lot of the revisionism at the time. And some revisionism is sloppy because of this, because they want to purposely and forcibly change up an idea of a character, and so he basically sleeps with her, and that was the only consideration where it's like the audience would be like, what, he sleeps with her? What? That does not happen. Like, the golden hearted hero does not take what he wants.
No.
In a lot of movies. And I can understand the thought here, but here, let's get really down into it. This is a woman of the West who's probably been traumatized sexually, has been put in a situation of her body being a transactional process. And ultimately in that scene, he utilizes her body as transactional. And that is a lack of consideration of her and her feeling, and whatever attraction she might legitimately have, I think is undermined by the sequence and by his action. It's similar to how James Bond acts in Skyfall when he's invited onto the boat with a sex trafficked child who's grown up as a transactional person.
Yeah.
And then he goes into her shower and starts, groping her and being intimate with her. There's something wrong about that in the scene, and both of these movies don't know how to address what's wrong, truly wrong about that.
Yeah, I just because, like I said, I'm getting to the point now where I think you reach a certain age, and if it's been X amount of years that you've seen something, you might as well, and you watch as many movies as you and I do, you get to a certain point where you're like, it's been so long, let's just say that I haven't seen it. And I remember because of that fact, I was so jarred by it. Like, wait, it's over now. So that's. But I love your interpretation of it, especially if is it being transactional. It makes it even more of a bummer.
It's a bummer.
I mean, because this film is quite unkind to women, super unkind to women. In fact, one of the worst, I would say, at least in terms of the spaghetti western and how they treat women.
I'm going to recommend, Sean, you got to watch A Great Silence.
I do.
It's just worse.
Damn it! I do need to see that. Let's keep it moving, because I think you and I are teetering on one of the longest shows that we've done together, and boy, there's some stuff that I still want to get to. Are we good on time on your end?
Oh, I'm free all day.
Okay. So we meet Hugo now. We meet Hugo. Now, another one of the things that I don't like, one of the only pieces of music that I don't like in this entire film is either Hugo's theme or the entrance of Hugo, however you want to phrase it. But it sounds like the goddamn circus is arriving, and I don't know if this was in the original cut, but I was just like, oh, like we've heard telltale of this man, Hugo, because one of the prostitutes earlier tells Maria, well, if Major Jackson doesn't kill him, fucking Hugo will. And we segue one of the most gruesome scenes in the entire film with a bit of circus music to introduce us to Hugo. So long story short, Jonathan, who was undercover, is found out by Hugo and the men. So the brother Jonathan's been playing both sides, Major Jackson and Hugo's outfit, and he's had. And they arrive in the town and they circle him. And what ensues next is nothing short of Reservoir Dogs. And I guess, again, because I hadn't seen it in quite some time, I guess I didn't remember. Like, I remember the taking of the ear, but what came next, I didn't remember. But ultimately, it plays exactly how it wanted to. So, long story short, they know that he is undercover, and they take his ear because he's been listening and spying. So they take his ear, and then they feed it to him. Kyle, they feed it to the man. And I love this. We get back to a little bit of the ultra violence that we had, moments before. Again, kind of. I'm going to say this at least 2 or 3 more times. We are moving at a very brisk pace in terms of the pacing and the structure of the story, and the body count is high. The violence is just outlandish, and I love, Kyle. I'm interested in your take. I love how they take Brother Jonathan's ear, they feed Brother Jonathan his ear, they let him fucking dance around in pain for about 30 seconds, and then they shoot him about 4 or 5 times until he dies.
Yeah. I would say poor Brother Jonathan, but he was a racist. So.
Yes, he certainly was. And
this is the same mentality that Quentin Tarantino uses to advantage to just have a heavy body count. You can have as heavy a body count as you want if they're Nazis or slave owners and races. Like it's perfectly fine.
You know what? I agree with that. You can kill as many racists, pedophiles, you name it. You can kill them all, and we can keep on going.
Yeah, you're right. I'm waiting for the movie where Quentin Tarantino does like a NAMBLA convention and they just come in and shoot up the entire place because they're pedophiles. That's what we need from Tarantino.
But here's the thing, though. You'd be rooting for it.
Exactly. I mean, during the Western season, it's funny. We talked about Inglorious Bastards, which a lot of people would go, "That's not a Western; it's a war movie." But I'd be like, "Well, go watch it again because it has all the music and shot tropes and rhythms of a Western, and that's why." I mean, he's a Western filmmaker. I mean, Kill Bill's a Western in a lot of ways. Inglorious Bastards, a Western. Django, Hateful Eight. And he makes homages to westerns throughout his career. So I mean, this is a guy informed by cinema, and he loves Sergio Leone, and Inglourious Basterds is a love letter. But we talked about his cathartic use of violence, and whether it's problematic or not, it's an interesting conversation. We get into its implications on whether or not that. But again, I think everybody would agree. It's like, punch some Nazis, shoot some Nazis. Why not?
Yeah, and it definitely makes it okay. And just for the record, yours truly thinks over here that's a Western, and so is in many ways. So is Kill Bill. So you'll get no argument from me there. And in fact, like, obviously, I knew that we were using a lot of the music cues in Inglourious Bastards from old spaghetti westerns. However, take that out of that and just look at the characters, and if you don't think that that's a western, I don't know what to tell you, because
he's based off the Apache, like he said. Like, they're scalping people, like these are all references and homages to the Magnificent Seven coming in. It's Dirty Dozen, but it's like Magnificent Seven coming in to take out the bad outlaws of Germany, which are the Nazis. I mean, that's how it's operating.
So we learn shortly thereafter, after Hugo and the circus arrives and they take out Brother Jonathan, we find out that Django and Hugo are familiar with each other. And this is where we definitely have the whole fistful of dollars and Yojimbo thing again, where now Django's going to try to pit one against the other, but not before they go on a gold run. Kyle, they go on a gold run, and I really enjoy this scene as well. But after some talk, we find out that Nathaniel takes his whores up to it feels so weird to say takes his whores. Takes his ladies up to Fort Chiriba to get some gold. Baby. And how they do it is just a bit of fun. They have a stagecoach that they all jump out of, and then another 50 bodies are annihilated, Kyle, and we are over 100 at this point. But what I wanted to point out in this scene, again, I'm going to do it at least 3 more times, how sharp this scene unfolds at a time where you could have thought that we could take an extra 10, 12 minutes with it. We don't. They're jumping out of the stagecoach and headed to get the gold, and it wraps up in less than 5 minutes. And I just think that filmmaking then and even now, you wouldn't see it play out like that. Like, we would have a much longer and drawn out heisting of this gold, right?
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier, this is a movie that wanted to be a success. I mean, this was like blockbuster spaghetti western. This is what they were like, this is what the people want. Let's give the people what they want. And that's 100% what's being informed here, is that they're cutting to the chase. They're not going to have overt exposition. They're going to use exposition as like a cheat to cut to the point. I mean, you even have in negative ways on this, and you're going to, because of how quickly it needs to go. I mean, this is an hour and a half movie, and what we're talking about right now is like 40 minutes into the movie. Like, we've done so much in 40 minutes. It's moving at such a fast pace. And but you get some negative aspects to that for those cheats. And one we didn't mention was when Major Jackson is confronting Django in the bar, where he shoots Ringo, who's a character introduced that is meant to be like an antagonist, but again, the film subverts your expectation and is killed instantly in the bar, and not left to be of the impact for the entire film. He mentioned, he's like, "Oh, I had 5 men killed by a drifter," and I'm like, "How the hell does he know that?" There's no way he knows that. There's no witnesses. Like, he does not like send one guy to go tell the major I'm on my way. I'm just like, there's no way he knows that. But again, this is a movie operating again on such efficiency and speed that you don't care. And it also doesn't matter really how he knows, because he's going to find out anyway. I mean, this guy's he's wearing a Union uniform. They're Confederates. There's going to be a showdown between these guys anyway. But you're right. They get to this heist sequence, and it's literally 5 minutes, and it's just a flurry of bullets and gunfire. And this is why you're watching Django. There's all sorts of reasons to watch a multitude of movies. To watch Django is to get into its rhythmic pace of just efficiency and speed and bullets and blood. And these are the reasons why you watch it.
I overlooked the scene that you just mentioned, and I also, for whatever reason, I steamrolled. Another thing that critics are really upset about is basically before Brother Jonathan meets his end, he says that he's talking to the prostitutes out on the porch of the bar, and he says that Maria's to blame for all this shit, and a prostitute mud fight ensues. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that A, this movie has a mud fight between prostitutes, and B, critics did not like that.
No.
But I will, I will say this as someone who fancies himself as a heterosexual. I didn't need to see a fucking goddamn. Actually, we'll take it a step further. All you people that are into that weird wrestling porn or mud wrestling porn, or I don't get it. It's
or hobo fights.
Yeah, no, I don't understand. I don't get the appeal. You ain't coming in my house looking like that. You're gonna have to take a shower before you come in here.
Yeah, exactly.
So they steal the gold. Cow. They steal the gold. They go to, now this is another town, right?
The one that they end up in?
Yes. So they cross the border into another town.
Yeah.
Okay, so they end up in another town, and Django says, "All right, my job here is done. Just if I could have my share of the gold, I'd like to get going now." And Hugo, who I shamefully have not said his name yet, played by Jose Baldalo, who I actually think is really good. In fact, I think both he and Eduardo Fajardo are great character villains, especially Eduardo. He's just got that look where you're just like, oh, you fucking snake. And then the flip side is you have Jose, who definitely reminds me a little bit of The Ugly, so
a little bit of oh god, what's his name? It just left me. Oh man, I'm gonna have to look it up now because
I got you. Eli Wallach.
You're right. There is a over the top nature to both of those characters. I think Eli Wallach is far more personable.
Oh, for sure.
Far better actor. I mean, talk about seeing the Misfits. If you've never seen him in the Misfits, I mean, he is exceptional in that movie. He is. But you're right. Jose Baldalo here as the general has a lot of personality, and you need that because obviously Django is feeding into it because there's a history there, and I think even the film is not. It's saying that Baldalo is not the villain of the movie. I think he's seeing a gray moral world where they have to operate and do bad things because there are forces that are against them. They are pretty much a revolutionary force. They are trying to seek independence. I mean, obviously, Corbucci has some sympathy with this, but they are forced to do bad things. And I think the film has that kind of perspective. And that's why the film reinforces it with the punishment of Django in a lot of ways because of his duplicitousness and because of his betrayal on his word in a lot of ways, based off of the relationship that he has. It's interesting. He's a villain of the movie based off of our rooted storyline, based on who Django is. He is our hero per se. But I think the movie, how they operate with the general, is that he is not the villain, and he certainly is not villainous. He is just an antagonist in a lot of ways.
You know who else is the villain, man? War, man. War is the villain, man.
What is it good for, Sean?
I'm still trying to figure it out. A whole lot of nothing. So they got the gold. Django tries to leave, and Hugo's just like, nah, man, give it a night, sleep on it before you go and make such decisions. And and as a token, why don't you take Maria with you? And in typical, and what should have been, we should have known that was typical Django fashion, but as Kyle has mentioned, and I agree with, he talks too much. But what should have been a very Django move, and instead of us being slightly perplexed, after he's offered Maria, he says, no, I'm going to take this darker one over here. And everybody has a good laugh at Maria's expense, and Django leaves with another woman. But it's a setup, Kyle. It's a setup. It is all, there's motives behind taking that lady. And just for the record, I know that we're not supposed to objectify, but that the lady that he ultimately does take is smoking. I think outdoes Maria.
I think he knows that because she is his distraction, and unbeknownst to her, she is the distraction. And then we get our now elaborate heist sequence.
Yes, and boy, this plays more for. You want to know what this kind of so I'll just kind of steamroll through it a little bit, and then Kyle and I will kind of dissect it. But so ultimately, he uses the girl as a distraction as she undresses in the window, so that the people guarding the gold outside will have their attention on her. So he and he can transport his coffin over the scaffolding of the rooftops of the hotel that they're at, and make his way over to the room containing the gold, which obviously he does successfully and silently. But when you see it unfold on film, you just go, this is one of the most outlandish scenes that we've seen up until this point.
So outrageous, Sean. Rewatching this movie, and then it's not only that, it's not just the creakiness of like carrying that coffin, then using it as a bridge, and then getting it into the place, and then he puts all the gold in it, and then his plan of escape is to use dynamite, where he then it's like dragging this gold-filled coffin now out of the place. I'm like, I just was watching this, and in my mind, I was like, this is the worst plan of all time.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've not seen this film, he's not wrong. He's not wrong, especially how long it goes on. And you're just like, this is fucking ridiculous. But low key, it is ridiculous, but in the best comical way.
Yes. Yeah.
And the point that I wanted to make to that is actually this is where I think there's a lot of that tongue-in-cheek that you had mentioned earlier. I think to the filmmakers, to the screenplay writers and the filmmakers involved, especially Corbucci, I honestly think he's just having a bit of fun with us. Like, I think this plays more like a Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin bit than it does a Django bit, if that makes any sense.
I think I can see exactly what you're saying. I mean, certainly Corbucci has a nasty streak and I mean, this is a guy who said before he made The Great Silence, if I do another movie with a horse, I'd kill myself. So it's like he has this kind of nasty appreciation for the genre, and it's like he's doing it out of necessity rather than love. So obviously, there's going to be some moments that are either underdone or intentionally undercut. And I do think that this scene plays out in such an absurdist manner that you're like, this doesn't make any goddamn sense. Like, but it is so. You're right. It plays off so slapstick and humorously that it is funny. It's funny to watch.
Yeah, especially like once he gets it to where he's lowering the coffin into the room with the gold, like you're just going, either that coffin is made of plywood, which up until this point none of us believe that. The fact that you were sliding it down and not a peep, like to me, like I just felt like I was watching a Buster Keaton, like he's evading the fucking or Chaplin, he's evading the Keystone Cops, and you're just like, oh fuck's sake, like we were super violent up until, but again, like I know some filmmakers also like they'll do the ultra violent and they're laughing as they do it, like it's not meant, they don't view it serious as the audience does, and I think this is another example of that happening, where almost, Corbucci's winking at you going, movie magic, right? Where you're just like, okay.
This is a product of the movie,
right?
And informed by our expectation of how the movies should operate, and therefore making a commentary at the same time. Yeah, very much so.
So, and the rigging of the machine gun, and then the inexplicably dumb people that see that the front door to the room containing the gold is being shredded with machine gun shots, but that doesn't stop one after one from piling into it and getting ripped to shreds like the morons that they are. And you're just like, how fucking dumb do you need to be, guy?
Well, they're just that was Mexican number 3 and 4 and 17. Like they were just they had no character name, so therefore they have no agency, and that's why they. I mean, this. I recall like doing an episode on Mulholland Drive with David Lynch, and there's like a scene where these people get off the airplane and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna make it in Hollywood, honey. Good luck." And then they get in a car, and then it cuts to them in the car, and they have these like Richard's dead smiles, and like they're not characters anymore. They're like dead essentially. And I'm like that's how these people like must operate in the real world. They're like these non-playable characters in a video game that are just operating on like programming rather than like actual character motivation. Their intent and creation was meant to be gunned down, and that they were fulfilling their purpose.
Right, and we continue to add to the body count, which you'll get no argument from me there. But they, amongst the escape by Django, of course Maria figures it out and says, "You got to take me with you," even though he seemed to have duped the entire town except Maria, and says, "You got to take me with you," and hesitantly he obliges, and they make it to the bridge where they first met. And because romance, right? If I think of Django, I think of romance. I don't think of any other genre when it comes to Django. So they make it back to the bridge together, and she gives one of the most nauseatingly fucking redundant, "This gold will only bring you heartache, Django." But something that I do want to comment on, because you had mentioned it earlier, and I fucking 100% agree with you. How quickly Django has had this shadow of darkness that has followed him, this shadow of depression that has followed him. We learned earlier that Major Jackson, who he's going after, we've went heavy on the spoilers, killed someone who he's loved. whom he's loved, and that's what this is about. It's about vengeance for that. How quickly it seems that, like, gold will erase all of that, Kyle. How it is such a, for me, out of nowhere line where he's just like, well, with this gold, I can basically forget about the old Django. And I'm like, wait a minute. That after all of this, and because of how wonderful Franco Nero's performance is, especially for, you know, kind of a one-dimension character, I thought Nero nails it. But then we have this moment where it's just like, all's forgotten because I got the gold now, and as long as I can kind of go forward with this new life, I'll be fine. And it's another one of those moments similar to when Django and Maria get together, where I'm just like, wait, what? Like, if anything, how this movie should play, like, you should be shipping Maria off with the gold. Like you just take a handful, put it in your pocket, and you ship Maria off with the gold, and we call it a day. But I find that interesting that you said that, because it really does become all about greed in the end.
Yeah. The basically, Corbucci is a cynic. I mean, you see it through most of his films. And he's saying that there's a corruptibility of good intentions or of valid, vengeful spirit or idealism in all sorts of ways when money's involved. And I think he saw that as like a criticism of what is the right word for it? The increase of wealth and the use of wealth as power. And wealth is, power corrupts, absolutely, but I think Corbucci was more of a sense that money corrupts and corrupts good intentions. And I think he sees our hero corrupted by essentially a valid sense of human nature's greed, and then in his twisted, tongue-in-cheek irony, punishes the hero for exactly that intent. Our hero is severely punished.
Yes, and just dramatic. But hold on. There was one thing that I don't like it when we shift gears in the script, like, dramatically. I don't like it when we're riding in fifth gear and then we dramatically shift it down to one, or vice versa. And what I mean by that is, so similar to when Django and Maria embrace, like, it just, like, it's one thing that she says and he's like, oh, you're right. We have similar instance here where she again professes her love to him, and he's like, well, I could never love again. And that fits. That's not the part that I have a problem with. But in a matter of minutes, all of that becomes not true again. Like, let's get into the violence real quick, and perhaps my favorite scene of the film in terms of technicality and deception. This is probably my favorite film. But what happened earlier is when Django first meets Maria, and he shoots down a couple of men. One of the men falls into quicksand under the bridge. I only mention that so that it doesn't seem weird and that it wasn't set up beforehand for what's about to ensue. So after she professes his love and everything, and he's just like, nope, I can't do it. Can't do it. I know I loved you not more than 9 hours ago, but can't do it. So he hits the fucking reins, the reins of the horse carriage, hits the fucking rifle, and then the rifle goes off and scares the horse, and then the coffin comes off of the carriage, and the coffin slides into the quicksand.
There's more evidence there for your slapstick, almost silent era comedy, because it's ironic, like it's just pure irony.
Yeah, it's just like, but because of that, I just felt, I was just like, well, wait a minute, like, I don't mind if you do it, Cal. It's just got to be done differently. Like, that scene can still play out, but or maybe it doesn't. Maybe because of, like, we've both said maybe because of the silent comedy, that's exactly how it's supposed to play out, and I'm a fool. But again, when you're watching it for the first time, and given the tone, the overwhelming tone of this, which is, it's meant to be a tough watch, and it's meant to be political, it's meant to be this, it's meant to be that. Comedy is way far down on the list, at least to a Western viewer, I would argue. So when this happens, it just kind of it caught me off guard, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like I said, I don't mind if you lose the coffin in the quicksand. The quicksand was set up in advance. I'm fine with that. But that just can't be how it goes. Like, it can be something as easy as Django's like, nope, can't love you. I'm out of here, taking the gold, and he goes to pull off, the fucking wheel hits a bump, and then it comes off. Like, whatever. Like, but you're right. Like, it's meant to be like this. It's meant to have this heavy irony with it. And of course, Django, who really hasn't shown, the only direction that he is shown throughout the film is that he really just wants to kill Major Jackson. Like, once we find it out, like, we know, okay, that's his only intent for this entire time. But the panic that all of a sudden comes across Django is he's willing to die for this gold now, Kyle, which again, I don't mind it, but tonally it just didn't feel congruent.
I'm in agreement with you, but I think the intent there is to just be a little bit sadistic with your expectations of what a Western hero should be. And I think Corbucci is either mocking you for wanting it to be a little more pure in thought and to be a little congruent. I think he's kind of just having a play at the audience expectations. I think it explains a lot of what he's doing through the movie. In a sense that it feels disjointed. And I think it's intentionally so. I think he's trying to be, playful and disjointed in a particular intent. But like I said earlier, sometimes in revisionism, it's ugly and not as polished because that's the intent at first, and they aren't moving it into the natural use of it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It just I don't like it when we I shouldn't even say I don't like it when we ... because there's plenty of movies out there that have mashed completely opposite genres together and have done a extremely good job at execution. And then I just chalk this. I wasn't a part of the culture, at the time, or specifically, like, I wasn't in the know of spaghetti westerns at the time. I could imagine, like, growing up in this area and being in this era and being a cinephile, there was parts of this movie that you were just laughing out loud at because you're just like, that would never happen. Like, this would never happen to Eastwood, or whatever the case may be. And perhaps I would appreciate it more from that aspect. But when you're watching it for the first time, you just kind of like, oh, wait, all that, and that's how we're losing the gold. But we rein it back in, Kyle, with one of probably my favorite scene in terms of execution of the film. So wouldn't you know it? After, I shouldn't leave out. So I did like this part. So the coffin goes into the quicksand, and Django goes in after it and is willing to drown with the coffin. And Maria postures herself on the bridge to help save him. And in her attempt to save him, she is shot on the bridge, which I did love because I definitely had, like, I'm a firm believer that if a movie came out in the 60s and you do one of these, like, then, like, that's just good filmmaking, or that's just good writing, where you just, I didn't see it coming. She gets shot right there trying to help him out, and he's actually yanked out of the quicksand by Hugo and his gang. And what ensues next, you know what? I've taken all the big ones. I've already said it's my favorite. What happens to Django next because he is a thief, Kyle?
Well, they proceed to well, and it's interesting because the general has all the right reasons to kill. Clearly the general values Django as to live more so than like the, as I said, the Mexican 1317 who just got pulled by a machine gun because of Django. Like Django is responsible for many deaths of the general's men. Although the general does say at some point, I forget if it's that my men are a little outdone, like they're done, like or something like that. He confesses to Django at some point, so maybe that explains his better consideration of Django in a sense as a person. And so he sends a man to punish the thief, and what do? You take their hands, and it would have been a little apropos for them to cut them off, but what proceeds might be even worse. It's
dude, way worse.
Break his hands at first with a rifle, like beat him with a rifle, and then beat down his hands, and then they have horses basically trample his hands to oblivion. It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, and it's so wonderfully well done, I think, by the DP Enzo Barboni. I just thought, this is being sold right now. I believe it. This is awful to watch, and this is a 1960s film. You know, we're not talking, this is hard to watch, a Serbian film. We're talking about kind of, what was meant for mainstream, what is now mainstream. Just a really tough scene to watch as the horses trample his hands, and I just thought, you know what, I tip the cap to Barboni for such a great laid out presentation of it.
Yeah, it's hard to be convincing of horses trampling hands when they're not actually doing so. So for the fact that they have this very low end shot and Franco Nero pained expressions as horses are quickly moving around in the area, and the bloodiness that is like protruding from his hands. It's effective, very effective.
Yeah, and it's so well executed that I don't even mind his Mickey Mouse hands that we see, like the end product where he's clearly wearing these oversized gloves that, they're all bloodied and muddy, and but I didn't even care. I was just like, yeah, they're probably all swollen. They would look like that. I have to convince myself. Yeah. Why doesn't this have a Who Framed Roger Rabbit feel to it, like where they are flattened to it? But, dude, one of my favorite scenes of the movie, just in terms of how it was shot and believability for, because obviously, you didn't have the effects that we do now, but B, doing it in a manner where I also think that they were still trying to be conscientious of the ratings and was able to magnificent. There is peck and paw. Would you disagree, Kyle? There's peck and paw throughout this in terms of we do these fast edits to sell the chaos of something, but we believe it even though the quick edits of the shots aren't necessarily depicting what's actually happening, if any of that makes sense.
Well, this is entirely true. You're correct. And what's interesting is that you could almost say it pre-Peckinpah, which is a pretty bold statement. Obviously the machine gun,
that's the big one.
A lot of Peckinpah. Although the Italian westerns were informed by an American filmmaker named Robert Aldrich. Most people know his work with Flight of the Phoenix and Dirty Dozen and such, but he did a western called Veracruz, and very much has a ransacking of down south of the border of a military base with a machine gun, and it's very prominent throughout. But you're right, this is very pre-Peckinpah. Peckinpah was very much informed. At this point, he had done Ride the High Country and Major Dundee as prominent westerns in the catalog. Wild Bunch would come 3 years after Django, and certainly Django, Bullet for the General. All of them, and Veracruz they're all informed by the use of the development of technology. And so Peckinpah is not necessarily robbing from these films, but he's being honest to the time period, much like these other films were being with the use of the machine gun. I mean, it's very prominent in its time period frame that it is a weapon of change. It changes the dynamic. You don't need many men in order to necessarily win a fight. And so this how this is all done, the violence, Peckinpah very much wanted to do this himself, and he was very much inspired by it.
And then, so we have everything that I just mentioned, and this is one of the times where I just a mild eye roll, not a big one, but now comes the demise of Hugo, who is now with the gang, and they're going back to Mexico, but they're about to be ambushed by Major Jackson, and they are, and everyone's lit the fuck up, and Hugo makes his demise, but the way that it's shot is very similar to the destruction of Django's hands, where it's kind of like, oh, we found that if we do circle the horses in this manner and we do set the camera up here, it is a beautiful depiction of destruction. But I don't, go back to the fucking Bubba Hotep podcast where we're talking about we've seen so many images that you start to devalue them. Perhaps at that time I would have totally been fine with it, instead of where I was just kind of like, oh, all right, so now they're all circling Hugo now as opposed to Django, and Major Jackson is going to put Hugo in the dirt, kind of unceremoniously, I thought, but not near as unceremoniously as the death that's about to come. But I just was curious if you happen to notice that as well, that we had a very similar setup, technique, and execution with the death of Hugo that we did the death of Django's hands.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is, you're right, there's something a bit unceremonious about it. It plays out. Again, this is all a product of moving at such a fast pace that they have these ideas and plot points in mind that otherwise should be probably a 2-hour movie, where all of these sequences should happen within the 2 hours, the same story. But a lot of these sequences should breathe a little more, should have a little more impact, a little more importance. I mean, obviously, with this decision, they get a more shocking avenue with the violence that they use, and so it's meant to be sort of the revisionism here is of the violence. They are trying to make commentary of the violence, either the desensitized nature of it, the thrilling nature of it, and then the ultimate outcome that it's painful, it's punishing, and it's unrelenting.
Yeah, it is. Not as unceremonious as what's coming next, though. So, again, inexplicably, I don't know how he does it, but goddamn Django is a machine and is able to scoop Maria with his now dumb hands and makes it back to the bar that is it looks like it's being closed down forever as Nathaniel is packing and get ready to leave. In busts Django with a shot Maria and says, look, you just got to save her. If she stays here with you, she can be saved. And Maria gives her farewell. Django, we'll never be together. If you stay here, you must go. And I'm thinking in my head, bitch, you're not going to be together if you bleed out. So this needs to be your concern and not for Django's safety. But that's here nor there. You just having a little bit of fun with the movie. But anyway, so it's time for our final showdown. But right before that, Major Jackson, now that he's killed Hugo, busts back into the bar because now back into Nathaniel's bar because now he's hot on the trail of Django and Maria. Maria is now hidden, and Nathaniel, tells Major Jackson exactly where Django's at. He's at the graveyard. He'll meet you there. And Major Jackson still shoots down Nathaniel, and it's not seen on screen, and that is the moment that I thought very unceremoniously, but I liked it. I don't mind that for the demise of Nathaniel. I guess because of Nathaniel's character, it makes it okay. Whereas, like, with Hugo, I was just kind of like, all right, I feel like maybe we needed a little bit more, or I could just be nitpicking it because that's what we do on the show, is we kind of nitpick. But the death of Nathaniel I loved because you would have expected more, and it wasn't that. He's shot off screen, and they just leave, and now they're going to find Django, and I really love that. What about you? Your thoughts?
Well, in comparison for the two, you're right. You know, it's a bit unceremonious. Could have a little more. You could almost say that maybe, and this just came to my mind as you were talking about it, that Corbucci is saying that there's something a bit unceremonious about the use of violence and the ousting of revolutionaries in Mexico during this time, that they were at the behest of other forces and powers that are either colonialist, racist, or however you want to describe it, and that they don't necessarily get to have their sense of romantic death in a lot of ways, that is undercut from them. I can see that being in Corbucci's mind, especially being someone who formed in that kind of politics in the time. With Nathaniel, it's a little more sad, and I think more, it's sad because it's a character who's, and maybe it's also a commentary on being in the middle. Like, what good does it do you to balance two sides of evil or two sides of competition, to be transactional in everything that you consider, and certainly he struggles with that. He struggles with the idea that he kind of is intrigued or might want to see this lone hero survive, because that person reminds them of him in a way that he's forced to be caught in between things, and this guy's a little free of that. You know, he's not caught in between anything. So he admires that or respects that. And so there's something sad about that he dies in the sense of not even remotely standing up for anything. He even gives the information and is proceeded to unceremoniously be killed based off of the nastiness of our actual villain, Major. And so it's sad. It's a sad part, too.
Yeah, it is the most lonely death in the film by far. Like you're just like, oh, fucking god damn it, Nathaniel. You know what? You should have bailed too, man. Fuck. And I love it because of how lonely his demise feels. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, man. Like, this is ahead of its time. I feel like that happens often in this film, where I'm just like, well, this is light years ahead of its time. Oh, this one is kind of dated a little bit. Oh, no, we're back to light years ahead of its time again. And Nathaniel's death, I think, fits the bill for that one. All right, Cal. We got to do the last part. We've picked apart almost every part of the film. We gotta shred the last few moments of this film. So, Django, as aforementioned, is now in the graveyard, waiting for graveyard with his dumb hands, waiting for Major Jackson for the final showdown. Now, even though the final showdown is quick, there is something that I just wanted to bring up to Cal, and only Cal, because, well, he's my guest and I do what I want. This is just a brief moment where you, audience, can't be a part of the show if you haven't seen it. So did you happen to notice the grave that he's at there, Kyle?
Well, I know he's at a grave, and I did read the name, but I don't remember it right now.
Mercedes Zorro, okay? That's not my issue. My issue, and I'm glad that I listened to the commentary after the fact, because I was sitting there just kind of like doing the math, and I was like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you notice time of birth and time of death, well, there's two different dates that look like they've been scratched out and then rewritten, but actually the date of death that's most prevalent is about, I think it's 1889. Now, the only problem that I have with that is multiple things from a story standpoint. One, That's about 25 years after the war ended. So that's thing number one. And I'm pretty sure Django says earlier in the film that he's only been out of the war for a couple of years. And so that would make him like 50. And so just that little thing, it really took me out of it for a good 30 to 45 seconds where I was like, well, wait a minute, that's not accurate at all. In fact, this is more perplexing. But now we know, like, that's the name of his lost love? That's our reveal? And apparently this takes place, and her death takes place in the future? I'm just confused by it all. And I was just curious if you happened to notice that.
I noticed that he was at a grave, and usually in westerns. And I in preparation for this one, like I was doing a 2-hour podcast yesterday. I had plans for lunch, and so I watched it in between my preparation for podcast and podcasting. So I didn't do as much note taking as I usually do for movies. But and so it is interesting because like when I watched this Sergio Leone ghost directed film called My Name Is Nobody, they're at the grave at one point. There's Sam Peckinpah's name, and so you're like, usually this is a trick. Graves do tend to give information, so I should have paid attention more in this rewatch on the grave because specifically he is hiding behind a gravestone, cross. If you were.
Yeah, that was the only thing that I was confused by.
Yeah, this is like something I don't necessarily have an opinion about because I wasn't paying too much attention. But what I will do after this podcast is I'm gonna go read what the name is, go dig into it. Is it his lover? Maybe. Obviously he has an awareness of this town. He has an awareness of the things that are going on around here. So maybe this is all a reveal and a link, but I don't know.
Yeah, it was just I was just sitting there looking at it, and I was like, well, even if you change the dates that have clearly been etched over what they were previously, it still doesn't make any sense. But whatever. That's just being a stickler for being a stickler. What happens next? What happens next is both sad and hilarious, depending on how you want to look at it, which is him trying to hoist the gun on the cross as Major Jackson and his men approach. Again, it goes back and forth for me, and again, I'm curious on your thoughts of it, where I'm laughing but also sad when he is trying to hoist the gun up. And in this particular scene, I don't like that I'm trying to figure out which I should be.
Well, it works in two ways, doesn't it? If there's a countdown to it, like there's tension building, like because there are men coming for him.
Right,
we know there are men coming for him. Men with guns, like they are coming. I find it almost sadistically funny. And I don't know if you read about this or if in the commentaries they made reference to it. But Django himself is named after a jazz guitarist named Django Reinhardt, who was an exceptional musician in spite the fact that his fourth and fifth fingers on his left hand were paralyzed. So I almost feel like the movie is like not taking a jab at the musician, but utilizing that name to be like mocking this person and mocking his situation, that he has to figure out a way in all of his in his paralysis or his emasculation to try and really find his way out of it. And there is an ingenious, inventive quality to it. He's taking off the finger holder on where the trigger is, so he can have more of an access to it. It's operating on two levels, and I think one is supposed to be funny, and the other is that it's legitimately building tension, and that it's that kind of weird blend of feelings that I think makes it weirdly effective. This last sequence in all of its like weird rushness and in depth, and we'll talk about it. But I think is phenomenal, and it's telling that they developed the movie from this scene backward. Like this is the scene that they concocted first. So this is like the pivotal moment, Django, in a lot of movies, and that they developed the movie, what you've seen prior to this, from this point, from this idea.
Yeah. I mean, again, we'll chat about it here in a second. But lo and behold, Major Jackson shows up and says, you better. It's a shame you to bring your coffin with you, because boy, you're gonna need it. You might want to say a prayer to the one above, and he starts cranking off some warning shots. And I think Major Jackson's like, I can't hear you. I can't hear your prayers. And in typical badass fashion, Django says, can you hear this? And he rips off 6 shots and guns down everybody. Everybody's dead, Cal. And
I was wondering, do you know how many people? Like, it was funny because when they enter the bar, I felt like there was more than 6 people, and then when they get to the graveyard, I feel like it is legitimately just 6 people because he cracks off 6 shots.
You are 100% right. There was like 12 people, and he arrives with half that.
Yeah, I was like, what happened to the rest of them? Like, and then I was wondering if like all those people were in the graveyard and whether like one bullet went through 2 people, and I was like, well, this is just absurd, and all the like hilarious ways that subverting the genre would be. But certainly he arrived with like less than what you imagine, and yeah, it is a badass line, isn't it? It's like, well, can you hear this? And 6 shots ring out in quick succession. All 6 bodies drop, and you're like, well, this is exactly the kind of the end to the showdown of the Western that you want. And I feel like there's again a cynical streak in this movie that I'm wrestling with and trying to figure out the more times I watch it. Is he leaves the graveyard having succeeded, but it's the best shot in the movie, a low shot of the grave. And again, it could allude to that. Is that the grave lover? Or is it, you see all these crosses and you see these graves and you see him wandering in the distance and you're like, is he just destined for death? Is that the inevitability of Django in the end, whether he succeeded here or not? It's interesting because I feel like, again, they're making a commentary on the expectation of heroes in the West and what goes down, and what is their future. And I feel like there is a nod here. It's very much what Kubrick did in Spartacus, where Spartacus's progeny is going to the future, and obviously Charlton Heston, not Charlton Heston, Kirk Douglas, excuse me. I don't know why I those 2 up now. They don't even look alike. Kirk Douglas, when the intention of his project with Spartacus is to have the future that his son and his progeny will eventually succeed. But Kubrick lined the entire shot with people dying on crucifixes. And I was like, that's brilliant. It's brilliant. He undercuts the entire idealism nature of the expectation of the politics of Spartacus. And then you have Corbucci doing the same thing, I think, here in Django.
Well, a few things. One, I just want to shoehorn this joke in. You want to know what happened to the other 6 that were traveling with Major Jackson? Well, the West got him. The West got him. So there was a snake bite to a horse with one of them. The other guy had a toothache, turned ill, heart attack. It doesn't matter. So I think the great thing about the shot that you're talking about, the gun intertwined with the cross on top of the grave, and the gun, of course, is dripping with blood, and we hold that shot as Django walks up through the graveyard into the sunset, for a better phrase. But I think it asks a couple of questions. One, was that his love? Was Mercedes his love, and he's giving up the gun for her now that he has achieved his vengeance? Or if that's not his love, because again, we it's not explicitly stated, is he just done with war? I think I love that shot for so many reasons, because I do think it opens up a lot of questions in terms of what's to become of Django. And I love that there's no definitiveness to it other than the fact that he's walking away from the gun. I mean, I just love, like, you don't know who he's doing it for. I love that, the vagary about that. So.
Oh yeah, me too.
And it's one of those, like, I don't, much like his motivations, I don't need a definitive ending. Like, and in fact, he only comes back for one official sequel, right?
Only one, and it was in the 80s.
Yeah, and I think I saw an international production still for that, or an international poster for it. Dude, it looks straight Rambo.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Django Prepare a Coffin? I haven't gotten a chance to see that one.
No, my exposure to Django has been only minor, and I have not ventured the series, and I think it's because of this fact that Corbucci did not continue with it.
Right.
Nero didn't continue with it. So what's the point necessarily? It's like it's like having Indiana Jones, and then the next movie you have like Michael Douglas playing Indiana Jones, and Steven Spielberg is like not doing it, and you're like, what is happening? And by the way, I think that just subconsciously came to me because I'm thinking of Romancing the Stone and such things. But it would just be different, and so I just have kind of refused, and that's a little obtuse of me. Like I should really venture it and like see what it has to offer and what really happened and understand it.
Well, there's only, as you and I discuss very often, dude, there's only so much goddamn time in a day, dude. Even with this, like, it was like, okay, I've watched the movie. Now I've watched the movie with the commentary. Now I've watched 30 minutes of Franco Nero bitching about how he didn't quite get the treatment that he wanted to. He was kind of upset. I guess that opening shot where he's dragging the coffin, everyone just left. Like, they were like, no, keep walking, we're filming you. And then they just left, and they met him back in town, and they just left him there. There's a lot of disdain. I'm not going to get into it because you and I have literally almost done 2.5 hours, so we're not going to get into it. But, I did find them fascinating enough to definitely look into. I don't know if you have the Arrow player, Kyle, but I think all the bonus features are on the Arrow player, and I definitely suggest checking them out because there's just, like, these types of films were made in a way that it's just weird to hear, whether it be shooting without sound, something as surface level as that, or kind of how they brought on a couple of the co-writers for this film. It just very interesting stuff, but for the most part, just the vibes seem very unpleasant. Like, people are very unhappy. At least not having been a part of it, but just the production of it. So definitely check that out, either on the Arrow player or get yourself the physical release, Cal. Get yourself the physical release of Django on 4K with a nice little Blu-ray of Texas Adios, which Texas Adios, that ending's no less grimmer than this one was. It's just, I was like, what a fucking bummer, man. Holy shit. But I need to see, it's called The Great Silence. I need to see that.
Gotta see The Great Silence, man. It'll make you want to slit your wrist. How bleak that movie is.
Well, you know what? I'm all for it. May have to do that one at some point this weekend. Kyle, good God, sir. This is we had a fun one this time. What can we expect from you around the corner? I know that you put the Wild Bunch up. What do we have around the corner for I Know Movies and You Don't? Hosted by Kyle Bruehl.
Well, next week is the end of the Western retrospective. So next Monday is a conversation on Tombstone, which I'm sure a lot of
look at us and our whore wives.
Look at us. Who'd have thought? It's like, I hate that scene. I hate that scene so much. I'm very pragmatic in the conversation. I was talking with an old film history professor that I had, and a dear friend who loves that movie. So I was very pragmatic in the conversation. I talk a lot more about the history behind the making of Tombstone and the history of the Earp brothers, the Clantons, and what is the reality of the situation. We get into a lot of like Brocious and Ringo, and that was fun for me. I like history, so I like getting into that aspect of the film. So that's more of that conversation. And then we have a nice little about what we talked about today in length. 2.5 hour conversation on Unforgiven is the finale next week. And then it's a little week break. I like to give people just a week to either catch up, get a little less inundated with the social media posts, and then my horror season 4 starts July 19th, and that goes to about November.
Holy shit, man. You just a machine. And I will say, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you're going to be listening to, if you can only choose one movie podcast, I Know Movies and You Don't would be, I would favor that far more. Well, I don't know. I don't want to toot my own horn, but this one was a goddamn good one. However, in most cases, listen to I Know Movies and You Don't and not this show, unless I Know Movies and You Don't is on this show. Because I'll tell you right now, you're not going to be more informed. And I think, like, well, one, I mean, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on your show and share my point of view. But more often than not, I was actually thinking about this the other day, not to keep you any longer. We are in a trend right now where it's like, I almost feel, I don't know if you remember the old South Park DVDs and their commentaries, but they would open every commentary, "This is my favorite episode." They would always say that, no matter what, they would be like, "This is my favorite episode." And I swear on your show, just due to, obviously I volunteered to be on quite a few, but they always seem to be ones that I absolutely love. And for instance, the couple that you have me on around the corner, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, it's like, and I don't say that, but I do feel like the last few times I've been on your show, I'm like, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's like, and I don't mean to be doing it in parody. We just keep on picking these films that are so goddamn strong. And even for something as fucking uncomfortable as I Saw the Devil, which you're going to have me on in a few weeks for that, like, I fucking like, well, okay, I really, really like I Saw the Devil. That's not one you can really revisit all the time, like, whereas you can with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. But I shit you not, dude, like, Shane Black's probably top 5 screenwriters for me in terms of just my personal interests. Like, it not like, oh, he's, top 5, the best have ever done it, but like Nice Guys is one of my favorite movies of all time. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, one of my favorite movies. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, we have a trend now where it's like, I keep coming on, and I don't know if your audience is listening to this. I just hope you don't think less of me. It's just, he's picking really fucking good films, like, like it, and I don't know. It's something that you should notice, and you should be listening to his show, not mine. End of story.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that long form praise. But I can't do my show without guests like you who are passionate, who come to the table when I send out my lists, my where you go, I love that movie, I want to talk about the movie. That's the exact attitude I want, like, from people. That's the exact philosophy I want to have for my show. It's like, I want to love movies. I want to have a positive spin. And that's what the whole point of the show is. And I can't do it without the positivity from people like you. So, I mean, it's a wonderful collaboration. I love the people. I love the conversation. It's great.
Well, you succeed, sir. You succeed. Thank you again. I'll be listening. Hopefully, more people will listen, and we'll be talking soon, brother. We'll be talking soon.
I look forward to it.
Kyle Bruehl, Kyle. He asked me not to call him Kyle. Kyle Bruehl. I Know Movies and You Don't. Just a wonderful show. So goddamn informative. Django. Arrow Video's release of Django. You are not going to get a more packed collector's edition than you will in this Django one. Ellis Cinema. Django. Arrow Video release. Kyle Bruehl. I know movies and you don't. Stay tuned. We got many more shows around the corner, and check out I Know Movies and You Don't. You won't regret it.